Howdy from Fort Worth, Texas, where it is 102 degrees at 1900 hours on this Monday, July 11th, 2022. Welcome to Stab the Dragon Productions for episode number 60 and whiskey review number 30. Here's what we're reviewing tonight. Western Son Texas Bourbon, single barrel. Western Son Distillery is in Pilot Point, Texas, about 40 miles north of Dallas in Denton County, pretty close to Lake Ray Roberts. Now they began, though, in Carrollton, Texas, and so they had a move to Pilot Point several years ago. They are known primarily for their vodka with about 10 varieties, blueberry, watermelon, raspberry, cucumber, things like that, peach. But this is one whiskey that they make. I think they make another one. I've seen it around, called Red River Bourbon. And so they're known primarily for the vodka, but this is a prize-winning bourbon. This is batch number 30, bottle number 2505. It is milled, washed, fermented, distilled, aged, blended, and bottled by Western Son in Pilot Point, Texas. This 750 milliliter bottle is a 45% ABV or 90 proof. And the website and the bottle both say that the mash bill is 68% corn, and they specify that it's a mix of Texan and Midwest corn, 22% Canadian rye, and the Canadians know a lot about rye, don't they? A lot of their whiskeys are heavily influenced with rye. And then 10% two-row malted barley, but we're not told exactly where that comes from. The mash is fermented in a 600-gallon copper pot still. They are aged in New American oak 30-gallon barrels, charred to a number 3 level. They use water from the Texas aquifer there in Denton County. There's no age statement given, so it's probably under 2 years, likely maybe even just a year in this Texas heat. And that is actually outstanding clarity and transparency because all of that info was on the bottle as well as the website. My total score for this bourbon, 87. Letter grade, A-. My recommendation, this is a very good bourbon and it's a pretty easy sipper. If you want to try a Texas whiskey that does not have that Texas barrel char funk, then this is the whiskey for you. If you're drinking your way through Texas distilleries, you must drink from Western Son Distillery. This whiskey is really very good. I can highly recommend this Texas bourbon. If you want a single barrel for a great price, this is a great deal for under 40 bucks. This would do well in a competitive comparison with any Kentucky bourbon, I think. I'll very likely buy this one again. But for my taste, I do tend to prefer the harder Texas whiskeys that have that strong barrel char funk going on. So there's the summary. Let's get into the details. History. Again, it was started in Carrollton, Texas in 2011. And they started off with just vodka because the guys, the co-owners, John Straits and Evan Batt, they had been working for a Russian vodka distillery, and eventually they said, hey, we can do this. There's no need for Texans to buy out-of-state owned vodka. So they got together and they started their distillery in 2011 and started off, again, making just vodka. But they gradually grew, doubled in sales from 2016 to 2017. Their vodka had won third place in the World Spirits Competition in 2017. So really, their vodka made them famous. A 2020 Growth Brand winner from Beverage Dynamics, this distillery was growing its vodka sales over 34% from 2018 to 2019, and that's a big deal. They're up there with the big boys. When they first opened, they started the company in 2011 and they first opened in 2012. They did make a source bourbon called Red River Texas Bourbon. Now they make this Western Son bourbon, and then they make a Red River whiskey, and I think it's labeled bourbon now too. That's a finished whiskey, Red River rye that's also finished uh, using some kind of wine cask. And then here we go. This is what we're going to be looking at tonight. So Western Son bourbon. They made the move to Pilot Point in 2015, and this whiskey, this bourbon that we're going to be looking at tonight, won double gold at the Cigar and Spirits Magazine World Spirits Competition in 2019. To win double gold, yeah, that's a pretty good deal there. So this is an up and coming whiskey brand. Let's look into it. 5 out of 5 for history. Marketing, bottle, package. This clear glass bottle is one of my tallest, so I only have a couple of shelves that can hold it. It's got a bold looking label, but certainly nothing fancy going on there. There's just a little bit of class here. I'm going to hold this up here. You can see that embossed emblem that is embedded in the glass there. That is a dove, and Texas has a lot of dove. Dove season is a big deal here. I used to hunt dove quite a bit. So the bottle, there's all the gobbledygook on the back. You got a little bit of embossing down here at the bottom. It says "Product of Texas" embossed in the glass there. There you go. So all in all, the bottle, it's got a rubber stopper. I've not seen any marketing, any commercials or anything for it. The bottle's got a ton of information about the mash bill that we've already gone over, the barrel, the char. It's got all of that information. So all that's nice. I think it could be presented a little bit nicer maybe, but we'll give it a 4 out of 5 for marketing, bottle, and packaging. Composition. It says that it's milled, washed, fermented, distilled, aged, blended, and bottled by Western Son in Pilot Point, Texas. And it's a 90 proof. I said earlier that it was 68% corn, 22% rye, and 10% two-row malted barley. So that's reasonably specific. There's a couple things that, I've seen other whiskeys that got even more specific. The mash is fermented in a 600-gallon copper pot still. They're aged in New American 30-gallon oak barrels, charred to a number 3 level. Now those 30-gallon barrels can speed up the aging process, and that's a little trick that some companies use because you get a little bit more interaction with the wood, supposedly. No age statement, though, is really the biggest problem with this composition that I'm looking at. There's no age statement. Now for bourbon, there's really not much age required. A lot of bourbons go out for sale that have been aged for less than a year. Now, a few months ago, I reviewed Tawakero bourbon and Tawakero rye. The company makes a big deal out of saying, hey, this is aged for 1 year. And when you see that bottle of Tawakero, it looks like molasses. It's so dark. It is one of my darkest whiskeys, and it tastes amazing. So 1 year in the Texas heat is good enough. So I imagine that's what's going on with Western Son, is it's just aged for a year. But they still should. I mean, Tawakero boasts about it, and I like that. That kind of transparency is great. So I wish they had done something with an age statement on the bottle or on the website, and they didn't. But otherwise, it's really pretty outstanding clarity and transparency. All of that info that they give. And at the website, they say they even use leftover grain to feed local cattle. So, after you do your mash bill and then you got all the corn and barley and stuff left over, you can dry that and then make cattle feed out of it. So again, not all the grain comes from Texas, and other Texas whiskeys do source exclusively from Texas. So, that's a little bit of a downer. They didn't tell us where the barley comes from. Could be anywhere. Canadian rye, that does make sense. I mean, the Canadians know their rye. So all in all, for composition, 13 out of 15 points. For good clarity and transparency. Appearance. This whiskey is not real dark. I mean, that's probably about a 3 on my scale. 3 out of 5. So 3 points out of 5. You know, it's medium dark, but I've got several that are much darker. Let's nose this whiskey and see. I've got a horrible nose. I can barely smell a little bit of sweetness. My nose, I can sometimes, smell rye better, and some scotches I can smell, but bourbon, no. So we give a 7 out of 10 as a consolation prize there due to my lack of a nose. Taste, the all-important taste, for 25 points. On the bottle and the website say dark cocoa, honey, caramel, and vanilla. Well, I get the caramel, I get the honey, I get corn and cinnamon, but no vanilla, none. And all these guys who say they get chocolate or cocoa out of bourbons, I've never ever. No, that doesn't work for me. Now, here's the story though. When I opened this bottle a couple of weeks ago, poured the neck pour, drank it. It was not good at all. It had some kind of a funky taste, funky mouth feel. I just did not like this at all. I thought, oh man, this thing is won some awards, and here I am tasting it, and it's not good. Okay, am I gonna have to drink this whole bottle? It had some kind of a funky taste I couldn't identify. You get a little bit of sweet, and I got a big burst of cinnamon, so it's like, okay, well, it's not real good, but maybe I can drink it. Well, here's the deal. Never, ever judge a whiskey on the neck pour. And I see that all the time by the big boys on YouTube, the guys who make money off of their reviews and stuff. They'll unwrap the wrapping, pop open the cork, pour a neck pour another one, immediately start tasting it and get all these amazing flavors. And I'm here to tell you that I've had a lot of bad experience with neck pours, and scientists say that's impossible. Nope. Here's the deal. When it is exposed to air, it changes the whiskey. And for whatever reason, in a lot of whiskeys, that neck pour, I don't like at all. And then as I go down the bottle, it gets much better. That's what happened to this one. 2 weeks ago, when I opened it up, it's like, oh, this is... Then yesterday, as I was writing this review, I was drinking this whiskey, and it's like, wow, this made a lot of improvement. Now, if you followed my other reviews, you know the same thing happened with Oak Cliff Bourbon and a couple of other ones that I've done recently. But the Oak Cliff Bourbon, that was probably the most improved bourbon that I had, because the first 2 pours I had from that were just awful. And then I set it aside for a year. Didn't open the bottle again for a year. And when I poured it a couple of months ago to review, it was like, oh, wow, okay, this is now drinkable. There you go. And that's 120 proof, so maybe that was part of the problem. And then a couple of weeks ago, I did Lead Slingers, American single malt whiskey. And when I opened it, it failed to impress me. I mean, it wasn't bad. It just didn't have much flavor at all. But then the night that I did the review, it's like, oh, wow, okay, now I'm getting stuff. So that happens to me a lot. Maybe it happens to you. If so, write a comment down below. But so right now, on the taste, for me, I'm getting, that corn, the caramel, the cinnamon, the sweetness, kind of a honey. So yeah, this is now pretty good. So it went from ew, I'm going to have to finish this bottle, to wow, this is actually good stuff. There's not much wood in here at all, and absolutely no Texas char. I don't get that Texas funk from the char at all. And if I was drinking this blind, not knowing what it is, I would swear it was a Kentucky bourbon. Absolutely. This does not taste like other Texas bourbons. But here's the thing I'm learning, and Herman Marshall was like this, Witherspoon was like this. There are some Texas bourbons that don't have the funk. I don't know what they do differently, but they don't have that hard Texas char, and I'm a big fan of that. That's among my favorites now. Uh, this is gentle, and again, I would swear it was a Kentucky bourbon. So 22 out of 25 points for taste. Mouth feel and finish. Again, when I did the neck pour on this thing a couple of weeks ago, the feel was kind of strange, and I'm going to try to describe the way it felt to me, the way it tasted and felt. You got like a little bubble of sweetness with that weird taste on the outside, and then the bubble pops and it's hollow in the middle. That's what it was like, mouthfeel-wise. Puffy, and then nothing in the middle. I don't know if that even makes sense. It was weird. Today, though, yesterday and today, it's a decent mouthfeel. It's not thin at all. It's about right for a 90 proof. It's got a nice sinus burn when I drink it. Certainly not harsh. There's no acetone or ethanol flavor, no magic marker. The burn is the pleasant burn that I expect with a 90 proof whiskey. So this is really hitting on target for 90 proof. It's a medium finish with just a bit of lingering sweetness, and the cinnamon's on the tail end. Okay, cinnamon's on the back of the palate. There's absolutely no Kentucky hug going on though. There's enough of a tingle that lingers to let you know, hey, you're drinking whiskey, and it's pretty good whiskey. So in other words, the mouthfeel finish is just about right. You know, I could go with a longer mouthfeel or longer finish, but I'm going to say 13 out of 15 points here. Price, value, and availability. Total Wine, $39.49. Specs, $39.88. And Goody Goody, $39.99. Now, where did I get this? Man, I don't even remember where I got this. One of those stores. I don't remember. But for a single barrel Texas craft whiskey bourbon, under $40, yeah, that's a good price. Very good value, good price. Availability is good at all the major liquor stores I go to. So 10 out of 10 for price, value, and availability. Definitely. Neat or mixer. Now, I definitely prefer it neat. I drink most of my whiskeys neat. The only time I do halfway of cocktail, which means I pour some Topo Chico in a glass or something, that's usually scotch. The flavors here are a bit soft. I think they're still likely to hold up in a cocktail, but the flavor profile here is gentle and soft. It's not big and bold. So it could get lost in a mixer, but I think it's at 90 proof. I think it'll be okay. So 5 out of 5 for neat or mixer. Bonus points. This North Texas craft distillery has made a nationwide name for itself with its vodka, and now its bourbon is really catching on. It's a definite winner. I like the fact that the owners, the founders of this whiskey, of this distillery, used to work for a Russian vodka distillery somewhere, and they said, hey, we can do this in Texas, and voila, here we are. So 5 out of 5 bonus points. I like their story. My total score, 87. Letter grade A minus. Recommendation, this is a very good, easy sipping bourbon. Along the same lines as a Kentucky bourbon. So if you want to try a Texas whiskey that doesn't have that barrel char funk, this is it. Okay, this is the whiskey for you. And certainly if you're drinking your way around Texas distilleries, you have to try this. Single barrel for $40 or less, absolutely. Good bargain. This would do well in any competitive comparison, I think, with Kentucky whiskeys. I would likely buy this again, For my taste, I tend to prefer the harsher Texas whiskeys that have that barrel char going along with it. But that's my recommendation. Conclusion? We have learned the great lesson to never, ever judge a whiskey from the neck pour. Come back to it a few days later, or in the case of some, a year later. And you know, don't give up on a whiskey. Drink your way down a little bit, give it some time, and maybe, you know, like it does for me, it'll improve. We've also learned that not all Texas whiskeys have a strong barrel char funk. How they do that, I'm not sure. Well, that about does it for Stab the Dragon tonight. If you aren't 21, don't drink. If you're boating or drinking, don't drive and drink at the same time, especially on the lakes in this hot water. Stay safe out here.